So as I was saying, this is the most valuable thing. His pursuit of just trying to find, okay, so there's no one single passage that says handle all conflicts this way. This is a compilation of the body of wisdom we get from God's word, right? And, you know, like, for example, if you only, hey, any of you guys grew up listening to Adventures in Odyssey? Ever listen to that one episode where they talk about all the contradictions in Proverbs? It's like this little, every once in a while they do these episodes where it was like, well, what about this? What about this? And they would read two different verses in Proverbs. One says, you know, answer a fool according to his folly, and then don't answer a fool according to his folly. And it was some kind of like, I think it was the, when they did on Adventures in Odyssey, one of those Wits End radio broadcasts, and they're like interviewing people. So anyway, when you look at Proverbs, that got me thinking about this years ago. You look at Proverbs, sometimes it'll say, handle a situation this way. And people think, well, if I handle it this way, it's the perfect formula. It'll always work out. Well, so is it true that when a man's ways please the Lord, even his enemies will be at peace with him? It's absolutely true. It's in God's word. Does that mean that it's a guarantee that your enemies are just going to love you because you're doing godly things? How did that work out for Peter and Paul and James and Jesus? I mean, you know, so obviously Proverbs is saying, hey, proverbially, this can happen, right? So you want this to happen, so do this. And so it's wisdom. It's not necessarily, you know, that you can take that and always apply to one situation. The reason I say that is because when it comes to handling conflict, you really need kind of a whole group of wisdom verses to give yourself the best chance of handling the situation. So that's where we came up with this. I talked about this last Thursday, but let's just look at it, or last Tuesday maybe. But the 4 G's of peacemaking: glorify God, get the log out of your own eye, gently restore, go and be reconciled. So the ones that are kind of the subtitles there, so they took this material and they turned it into a secular curriculum that secular businesses can use, because a lot of times, you know, just because two people don't know the Lord doesn't mean that they can't work out a problem. And so they use these more kind of generic terms: go to higher ground, you know, get a different perspective on things, get real about yourself, you know, you got to admit your fault, gently engage others. So the word gentle, you know, you can have a broken arm, and if you're going to try and reset a broken bone, you can just crack it really quick and put it back in the cast. But a better way, so you don't do other damage, is to be gentle with it and get together on lasting solutions. So that's kind of the way they say it. If you're trying to, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but have you ever tried to talk to someone about spiritual things and you realize that you have so much spiritual lingo that you use that it's hard to even communicate with them? So I moved from Guam to New Hampshire, moved our whole family up to Dublin, New Hampshire. I became the pastor there for a year, and the local newspaper came to interview me. Like, hey, it's a big deal, you know, new guy in town, obviously not much happens up there. So they interviewed me, and she's like, why would you move from Guam to Dublin, New Hampshire? I mean, we are out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, well, you know, the Lord led me. And I'm like, and you could just see the look on her face, Lord led me. Yeah, I just had, you know, I just knew my heart. I just, you know, I sensed that, you know, God directed me. He directed you. And I could not come up with a way to say it to her that didn't sound like a bunch of spiritual mumbo jumbo. Now, when we're talking to fellow believers, we kind of all speak that same lingo. But then when you're trying to translate that to, you know, trying to tell someone that doesn't understand that, I mean, man, it's really challenging. So then I had to come up with a way of saying it that she would understand. You know, there was an opportunity to come and take a leadership position here at this church, and we met someone and they told me about it. And after discussing it and considering our options, we realized that this was a very good move for our family. We love it here, you know, kind of keep moving. Same thing happens with this. I really like the subtitle versions. That's the ones I learned. Glorify God, get the log out of your own eye, gently restore, go and be reconciled. But I do understand that sometimes you have to kind of take some of the Christian lingo out of things so that you can build a bridge to tell people the truth and then draw back to scriptural principles. So you'll find yourself, if you work in a secular organization, sometimes you're restricted from, talking too much about the Lord. You got to consider the opportunity and not take advantage of it. So you want to be a good testimony. You don't want to hide your candle under a bushel, on lingo. On the other hand, you don't want to take advantage and end up actually abusing an opportunity you have. So you got to be very careful. So that's why there's two kind of titles there. These 4 steps, though, if you think through these anytime you're getting ready to go into a conflict, I guarantee it will turn out better than if you just go in there and do whatever comes natural. Our natural ways of handling conflict never work out. That's what's on the front here, are all the natural ways. From escaping a conflict or denying that it exists. I'm kind of the denial person. Like, I'd rather just act like there's nothing wrong. Or attacking responses. People literally assault people verbally or blame people. So the 3 kind of biggest ways that most Americans handle conflict is they act like there's nothing wrong. That's kind of a Baldwin trait. I don't know if that's just some Missouri thing or what, but we literally, both sides of my family, if there's a problem, just act like it doesn't exist, even though everyone knows there's a problem. Just like, just pretend. Let's just get through this Thanksgiving. Let's not have any talk about politics. Let's just kind of keep going. Don't bring up the thing. So we act like there's nothing wrong. Other people, they're just always like itching for a fight. Like, it doesn't take much to set them off. And it really doesn't matter what it is. They just have this tendency to be easy to fight with, called pugnacious in the New Testament, where it says a pastor shouldn't be a brawler. The word is pugnacious, someone that likes to fight. And then the third is someone that just kind of just allows it to go on and kind of takes the blame, and it's not really their fault. And so this kind of helps you with all that. Turn to the back of this real quick. So I'm kind of rambling here. Just want to talk about these 3 principles. I like the way he's alliterated this. The 7 A's of confession. So when someone does something wrong and they realize it and they want to make it right, this is a pretty good little acronym here. Address everyone involved. Okay, so everyone that's affected. So if I stood up in here and I reamed out Abigail, I can't believe you're late. Why? I bet you're not late for Mr. Waltersdorf, and just start, yelling at her, right? Later on, I feel convicted. Maybe my blood sugar was low. Just kidding, that's an excuse. And I go to her and I apologize. And she forgives me because she's a godly lady. I still need to apologize to everyone else that was in the room. I can't just get away with, well, I just sinned against Abigail. I really sinned against everyone by behaving that way, right? So I have to address everyone that was involved. Sometimes when you commit an offense, it's not everyone that's in observance, it's everyone that was affected by your decision. Let's say that, I stole from, the coffee shop that's owned by one family, and, the money I stole hurt the whole business. Well, I probably need to make it right with the whole business. There's probably money to pay back to the owner, but there's also an apology to the whole business. And there's probably earthly consequences for that. So address everyone involved. You can't get away with just kind of halfway doing it, or only apologizing to people that are going to forgive you right away. Avoid the words if, but, or maybe. Don't excuse your wrongdoings. I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings, but I just didn't realize you don't have a sense of humor. That's not much of an apology. I'm so, I'm sad that, that I dinged your car. But if you would have parked it straight, it wouldn't have happened. Not an apology. So avoid ifs, buts, maybes. Admit specifically attitudes and actions, right? So there's 2 applications. One is, that does not mean, that person really irritated me in my heart, I never showed anything. I never did anything about it, but I'm just not going to tell them that they irritated me and apologize for it. Well, that's kind of being manipulative. You're really irritating me, but I'm sorry. I think, it doesn't help you, right? But you should admit specifically, hey, if I yelled at you, I'm sorry I yelled at you, and I'm sorry I was just totally impatient and out of line. So you got to admit very specifically, not just like, I know I probably did stuff wrong with you this week. Are we okay? Everything good? That's not, that's the way you'd like to handle it, right? Like, Abigail, the thing, and yeah, and we're, there you go. That's the worst apology in history. You got to admit specifically attitudes and actions. Let's see here. Acknowledge the hurt. This is where people's pride gets in the way. You sometimes don't want to recognize just how bad what you did was, right? You try to minimize it, try and be like, yeah, it was bad, but it's not that bad, right? Well, if it hurt, then it hurts. And this is what, when you have kids or if you work with children, you start to realize that, one child walking down the hallway inconsiderately steps on another child's foot. It was an accident, but it hurt their foot. So they don't want to apologize because it was an accident. I didn't mean to step on their foot. Yeah, but they're crying and they're holding their foot, and you still have to say you're sorry. So you do have to admit the hurt, accept the consequences. So some things we do, they're just consequences. Sometimes we did something accidentally. I saw not a very good driver. I'm trying not to use angry words. Yesterday, I was riding with someone down 9th Street, just right here in the neighborhood over here. And there were piles of leaves along the road. And the guy was driving and then weaving over to drive through the leaves and then drive back. Well, what if driving through the leaves, there was a child in one of those piles of leaves? Well, he wasn't driving through leaves to hurt a child, but if he did, there's going to be consequences big time, even though it's totally an accident. Now, it's less consequences than maybe it was on purpose, but the end result is still kind of the same for the victim. So you have to accept the consequences. That's kind of, in pastoral counseling, let's say someone hit their wife. We always took the approach that the victim is the person that we have to defend. And so if someone hit their wife, we'd say, hey, whoa. And they come and they tell us they're like upset about it. They're sad about it. Hey, you can apologize, but you also have to go with this to the police and you have to turn yourself in for hitting your wife. Because if you're really sorry, you'll accept the consequences. Most people that victimize other people, of course, they're sorry in the moment, but they don't take the consequences and stuff just keeps getting perpetuated. So people have to be willing to accept the consequences. Alter your behavior. Someone keeps doing something wrong and they kind of keep, making this confession every time they do, nothing ever changes. Are they really contrite? What Psalm 51 talks about. We have to have a broken and contrite spirit. We got to be willing to literally change our behavior, repentance, and then ask for forgiveness, kind of the last step. You can go through all that, but if you don't actually ask the person to forgive you, so what if you're on the receiving end and they don't do this? Well, you have the 4 promises of forgiveness. See, you don't have to be treated right to forgive someone. Matter of fact, you can expect that it's going to happen over and over again where people just aren't going to always fall in line with the best way to do things. And you got to be willing to forgive anyway. One of the biggest conflicts I've observed in life was where someone was not willing to forgive someone because they didn't like the way they apologized. And so they got more and more bitter about the lack of saying the exact words that they would have made their children say, but this is a fellow adult. And so their lack of satisfaction with the way the person apologized led them to be bitter. They never really forgave. So does someone have to go through the 7 days of confession before you forgive them? No. You can forgive someone that never apologizes. You can forgive someone that died. You can forgive someone that's sitting in prison that did something criminal against you. Forgiveness is your choice. And these 4 promises of forgiveness, they're really good. And when you might have a friend, roommate, coworker that is just bitter about something, you can share these 4 promises with them. I promise I will not dwell on the incident. It doesn't help anyone. They're not going to work through their stuff if they're just sitting there thinking about what offended them. You just kind of keep going over and over. Speaking from experience, it just makes you physically ill to do that. So don't dwell on it. I will not bring this incident up and use it against you. Once forgiveness has been granted, it's not, it is like, the consequence might still be there. The damage has been done, but you cannot just pull that back out and, 10 years later and retry the case. If true forgiveness has been, if you've truly forgiven, you're not going to bring it up and use it against them. I will not talk to others about this incident. Doesn't mean, we're not talking about cover up. We're not talking about what I call circling the wagons, where it's like, oh boy, if I really forgive, then, we won't call the police about this. No, that's not what this means. It means that I'm not going to go around and say, if it was Abigail, Abigail say, did you hear how, Mr. Baldwin talked to me? And his apology was the lamest apology I ever saw. And then she goes and tells someone else. Then she tells someone else. Maybe go to tell my boss so that I get in trouble for it. That would be fine. But going from person to person, all you're doing now is spreading that bad, that bad report. And it really doesn't help the situation, right? Just on the verge. Some of my most frustrating dramas you watch on Netflix or whatever are where something's just on the verge of getting better, but then the person goes and tells someone else, or they handle it wrong, and now it just got really complicated and messy. So I will not talk to others about this incident. That does not mean covering up, a crime or anything like that. I will not allow this incident to stand between us or hinder our personal relationship. So if you're forgiving someone, you're saying, hey, I'm not gonna, this isn't, every time I look at you, I'm not thinking of what you did. Now, what if someone did something criminal? It doesn't mean that they deserve to be let out of jail just because you forgave them. It doesn't mean that you have to go and spend every holiday with them. Sometimes Chip Ingram does a really good job. He has a series about becoming a new creature in Ephesians, but he talks about how after you grant forgiveness, there might need to be some boundaries created so that someone continues to hurt you. That's not you not forgiving. That's just you being wise. So there's, and counselors and stuff can kind of help work through that kind of stuff. But even in a work situation, someone wrecks the forklift at the warehouse. They totally run it into the wall. Then they cover it up. They don't confess and come and tell us if they wrecked the forklift. So I'm going to dock this guy's pay for wrecking the forklift. Even though I'm like, he lied to me, I forgive him, but he's still got to pay for it. I'm not every time that I see him saying, hey, forklift wrecker, I'm not trying to, let it just constantly be there. On the other hand, every time he gets his pay stub, he's going to see $50 missing for the next 3 years. Those paid for. And the only reason I'm doing that is I could have let him go, but I'll never get my money back. So I keep him around, but I don't, I truly forgive. I have to move on, so there's consequences, but they move on. So that's really, it's a very freeing thing to have that, because I've had a couple of things in my life where, someone seriously offended me, and it's not going to get better. There is no total reconciliation because of where they're at on it. So what I have to do is I just have to practice this. And every once in a while, it's like the movie, it's rewind and plays again in my brain. And I have to go through this. I'm like, okay, Lord, I don't want to keep bringing this up. I don't want to dwell on this. Pray for their, blessing on their life, whatever. Once I realized you could pray for your enemies, and I started praying more for some people. But the pause principle, this is the final thing. So this works really well if you're trying to create that reconciliation. Use the pause principle. Prepare before you go. So if you need to go talk to someone about something that happened, and it could be either they might not own up to it, or they might not like that you're coming to them. If you use this really does help you get on track. Prepare. So before you go, prepare your heart. Also make sure that you have your facts in order. If you just go to someone and say, I know you stole the bread out of my refrigerator and it clearly had my name on it, it's like, then the other person walks by and they're eating bread and they got crumbs all over them. It's like, oh, I messed up. So make sure you know what you're talking about. Be prepared and make sure your heart's prepared. Affirm the relationship. So if this is a situation where you're going to someone, you want to have a relationship with them still, you want to make sure before you get started on this, where you're going to have to talk about something that's going to be tough, make sure that they know you're here because you want to have the relationship. If you didn't want to have the relationship, you would have handled it differently. Understand interests. So put yourself in their shoes. Someone's coming to me and they found out that I took their bread. And this is really embarrassing. So, obviously this might not need to happen in front of the prayer circle. Maybe this needs to happen somewhere else. Search for a creative solution. Hey, I know you're probably hungry this weekend. There wasn't any food. The cafeteria was closed. You did eat the bread my mom sent, my favorite. Would you mind getting me another loaf of bread when you go to the store today? You're coming up with a creative solution, and then evaluate options objectively and reasonably. So these are small things, but what if it's a business situation? What if you're in a real estate deal and you and someone that you're really close to are both supposed to be investing in a property together, and they do something that kind of makes it where you cannot continue to invest with them? Well, you can use this principle. Make sure you know what you're talking about. You're really ready. Affirm the relationships. This isn't personal. Understand. Try and think, why would they have done it that way? Maybe there's something I don't understand. That's what Matt Williams always says. Go as a learner, not a teacher. Ask lots of questions. Search for creative solutions. Hey, we went into this thinking we were going to put our money together, and now we're not. Jack Mitchell in his testimony during missions conference, he took this to the extreme. He literally gave the other guy his business. And evaluate options objectively and reasonably. You have to recognize that just because you think you know the solution, it might not be the solution. There might be multiple solutions. You got to always be willing that there's another way besides your way. I think you can go in confident that there is a way to fix this. I think I know one way, but I'll work with you if there's a better way. And you kind of say that. What you're trying to do is you're trying to tear down any wall. What you're not trying to do is manipulate people into just doing what you want. So people could use this and say, aha, I'm going to be a master negotiator. I'm going to use these to get my way all the time. That's not what this is for. This is for true reconciliation. And as a Christian, we really have an obligation to behave in the way that this talks about. So Christians are set apart by the way they handle conflict and tragedy and loss and being persecuted and offended. Everything you read in the Bible, that everyone's testimony was enhanced when something went wrong. In the New Testament it says that even pagan people are happy when things are going well, but when things start to fall apart, how do we behave? So I think it's really important. So what I'd like to do is I'll put out a little quiz study sheet, which is just going to be a couple of principles off of this. And then that'll be out there for you to take sometime in the next week. And then the only other thing, I can't remember, are there still any writing assignments left? I can't remember. I know you all turned.
There's the chapter 8, and then there's chapter 9 for both books and chapter 10 for both books.
Okay.
And then the exam.
And then
There is the only exam is the not so final exam project. I might drop one of those reading assignments that give you a little breather, and instead, you know what, how about this? How about instead of reading chapter 10, you give me a short summary of this discussion. So it's not that I don't want you to read chapter 10, but it's a short semester. We got to cut something out. I don't want to overload you your last 2 weeks. So I'd rather you just write a short summary of your takeaways from this, maybe 2 paragraphs.
So is that chapter 10 for both books or just?
For both books. No chapter 10 for either book. So instead of chapter 10, I remember, I'll update that in Canvas. Just write a 2-paragraph summary of some takeaways from this. And then keep this handy. If you need more of these, let me know. I'll order some more. I have a few extras if you want to share one with someone. But these are really valuable. And having it, they also have like a little bookmark version of it. But these, I've used this. I bet I've used this 100 times. And then I bet I've talked about it at least that many. So, okay. All right. I'm going to let you go early. Thank you very much.